Hello, fellow citizens. My name's Dr. Benjamin Jones, and I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about an Australian republic, how to achieve it, and most importantly, what model is likely to pass the high bar of a referendum. As an academic, republicanism and national identity are my main research areas. My honours thesis way back in 2007, my PhD were on republicanism. I've since published 3 books on republicanism, as well as dozens of articles and interviews in the mainstream press. So it is a topic I've thought deeply about for over a decade. And for those who, like me, do not welcome the prospect of King Charles of Australia, these are my thoughts on the political reality of getting a republic up. My most recent book on republicanism is called This Time, Australia's Republican Past and Future. It's only a short book, the e-version's only $10, and I encourage you to read it as it does outline the history of republicanism back to the 1850s. It traces that long history right up to what went wrong in 1999, and that leads me to some suggestions moving forward. The model I suggest in the book, it's sometimes called the Jones-Pickering model, designed by myself and Professor Paul Pickering. It's often called the hybrid model as well, and as I'll explain later, it could be called the Federation model and marketed that way. I've written an abridged summary of it, and there's a link to that in the description. The main idea for the hybrid model is that each state and territory parliament nominate a worthy Australian to be head of state, followed by a popular vote of those 8 nominees. So it is a hybrid in that it combines the strongest features of both the minimal model from the 1999 referendum and direct election. I'll keep this video short, so I'm not going to go over minor technical aspects, though they are important, and you can read about them in the book. I was fortunate enough to have a constitutional law expert from the ANU, Ryan Goss, look over the model for me and assure me it was workable. But I mainly just want to say why I designed it. And the simple answer is I designed it to win a referendum. I'm a historian and I know how difficult it is to pass a referendum, just 8 from 44 attempts. And that is a fundamentally different beast to winning an election, and it must have broad bipartisanship. I also know that in 1996, however, support for a republic peaked at 76%, and despite the often convenient answer of saying the referendum failed because of John Howard, and it remains true that he certainly didn't help the cause, but the truth is the republic sunk because Republicans voted no in large numbers. So the good news is we don't need to convert monarchists, as it were. Rather, we need to unite Republicans. Nicole Mitchell wrote a really important article in the Journal of Political Science back in 2010, and she used survey data to find a cycle of defeat. So Australians are roughly split into 3 equal thirds: monarchists, minimalist Republicans, and direct election Republicans. So monarchists are a minority by themselves, but if either Republican side joins them, they can spoil a referendum, and that's exactly what happened in 1999. Direct electionists were part of the official No campaign. But please be clear on this point: if we go to another referendum with direct election, hundreds of thousands of minimalists will vote no, especially conservative Republicans, and it will fail again. And that's no empty threat. That is based on extensive survey data. A huge proportion of minimalists prefer monarchy to direct election. So the only way forward is to find a truce between the 2 Republican camps. So we need to look at their rationale and find a Republican compromise. And that's the driving force behind the hybrid model, taking the best features from both sides and letting both sides feel as though they've been heard. So looking first at the minimal model, it gets its name because supporters want minimal change to become a republic to the current system, which means Instead of the Prime Minister choosing a Governor-General who will represent the British monarchy, Parliament will choose a head of state by a two-third majority, hence bipartisan, to represent the nation. That's the model that went to the referendum in 1999, and even though it lost, it has many good features. The main strength of the minimal model is it serves as a safeguard to ensure that we get the kind of person as head of state that most of the public would broadly think should be. A very common concern when you talk to people about becoming a republic is that they don't want a billionaire businessman who can afford blanket advertising or a celebrity sports star using their high profile to gain office. So minimalism, number one, it's a safeguard against the type of person who most of us would not want to be our head of state. The two-third majority also ensures that it won't be a partisan appointment, won't just be Labor in government getting someone from Labor or Liberal getting someone from the Liberal side. And parliaments are unlikely to choose a crass populist or a celebrity or a billionaire who can simply buy the position. The second strength is it allows nominees who would not normally put their hand up. By the Parliament making the initial selection, there's no need for campaigns, and people who are simply living a life of service to the country, in the military, in philanthropy, and in various other vocations can be identified and rewarded with a nomination. In the hybrid model, I put forward the following criteria for being head of state. In the opinion of at least two-thirds of sitting MPs, the nominee must have served the nation with distinction in their chosen field or fields and be of exemplary personal character and integrity. But the hybrid model doesn't end there. It also has a popular election. So the head of state must pass a double hurdle. They must first have the confidence of one of our democratically elected parliaments, and they must have the confidence of the Australian people. And this is the real strength of direct election. The literal meaning of a republic, res publica, it is a thing of the people. The popular vote is not only democratic, it's also a spectacle. It invites citizens to the process and allows them to make their voice heard. It gives the people the final say on who will hold the highest position of constitutional honour in this country. So the hybrid model is uniquely Australian. It draws on the strength of our existing federation to produce 8 nominees. It has a powerful safeguard against unsuitable or potentially embarrassing candidates by entrusting the shortlist to parliaments, and it becomes a celebration of democracy by finishing with a popular vote. A person who passes the double hurdle is far more deserving of representing our nation than someone who happens to be born into a particular family of British aristocrats. Getting a republic referendum over the line will rely just as much on campaigning and marketing as it will policy and model design. Remember, the minimal model from 1999 wasn't just hastily thrown together. Former Labor Prime Minister Paul Keating convened an expert panel of constitutional experts in 1993, and it remains in many ways the most straightforward way to become a republic without disrupting the present system. And as former Liberal Party Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull still insists, support for direct election is a mile wide but only an inch deep. And that is to say, people instinctively will say, well, yes, of course I want to vote. But as soon as you explain the implications, they tend to change their minds. But the fact is, Australians have a very poor understanding of our constitution. Some think we're like the UK without a written constitution at all. Others think we're like the US and have a Bill of Rights in our constitution. And we can't sit down one-on-one with every voter and explain the technical elements. And we have to accept that many will vote in ignorance. So we can't just get the policy right, we have to get the publicity right too. So finally, I'd like to turn to a few predicted criticisms of the hybrid model. Firstly, well, doesn't that all sound very complicated? First the parliaments choose nominees and then there's a popular vote. No, it's a simple two-step process, and the key messaging will be that it is a double hurdle: confidence of the parliament and confidence of the people. Will bigger states have an advantage with larger populations? No, and I really stress this in the book. Parliaments are instructed to choose a worthy Australian, not necessarily someone from that state or with any connection to that state. Personally, I don't think parliaments or the population are going to vote along state lines. But if this is seen as a big issue, it could simply be changed so that parliaments must nominate an Australian who was not born in their state. But consider the Australian of the Year award. While each state is represented, the focus is overwhelmingly and rightly on the qualities and the service and the biography of that individual, and that's exactly how it should be within this model. Another possible criticism: once nominated, won't there be an ugly campaign process? No. Again, consider the Australian of the Year awards. The Australian Electoral Commission should have an education budget to run neutral information ads about the 8 nominees, but beyond that, there's no need to campaign. Again, if people feel it is necessary, a rule can be added that candidates cannot campaign, although that would be difficult to define or enforce. My own feeling is that ultimately we need to remember the final say is with the people, and I think you do have to trust their judgment. A few minor points to finish. Should the federal parliament have a nominee? Also, some have suggested to me, and I'm not opposed to the idea. If there's a strong support for a 9th nominee, then why not? What should the head of state be called? Again, this is just my own feelings, but anything except president, as it would be confusing and brings up wrong connotations to the Australian system. My preference is that our head of state be called elder, a word with significance both for Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. It's a word which doesn't mean someone with authority and control, but an elder is someone who commands reverence and respect, and someone we turn to for wisdom. And I think that's what we want in a head of state in the Westminster system. And finally, I propose optional voting for the head of state in this system. And I think it's a good idea because it marks a clear distinction with our state and federal MPs where we have compulsory voting. We don't vote for the Queen. We don't vote for the Governor-General. So I don't think we should have to vote for the head of state either. Plus, I think it's a reminder to the head of state that they haven't been elected to wield executive power. So the hybrid model works if we continue to rely on protocol for the head of state to be ceremonial and not to interfere, but it also works if we decide to codify the head of state's powers. And in my opinion, that is something we should definitely do if we move to a republic. And that way we can honestly say that this move guarantees we cannot have another dismissal as we had in 1975. Finally, I've used the term hybrid model because it's a quick way of explaining that it combines the best features of minimalism and direct election models, but it could also be marketed as the federation model, and perhaps that is more catchy to really sell it. And it emphasises that this model, it's democratic, it's uniquely Australian, and it draws on our history to present a vision for our future, one with no foreign monarchy, and the sovereign will be the collective will of the citizens of Australia. Long may they reign.